So I will be your moderator for this evening. I'm Heather Braver. I am, most importantly, a proud Harriton mom. My daughter, Samantha Braver, has been passionately involved with Gems Not Genocide. And I was hired for this important gig tonight because I also am a journalist who used to anchor the news before I had my 5th child. So now I'm home with the 5 kids, but I love to come out and dust myself off. So you'll let me know if I'm doing okay tonight. Ah, there are 2 of my 5 kids and my husband. And another one. Hey, Sam. Just as you guys are sitting down, I can't help but marvel at the fact that we're all here because of the passion of an 18-year-old kid. You'll hear more about Avery Bernstein later, but the passion didn't just start at age 18. It started very young when she had an opportunity to learn a little bit about some of the dark secrets on the other side of our world. And I've never really known anyone like Avery. I could get very emotional talking about her because she's truly one of a kind, and her passion has spread among the students here at Harriton High School. Again, thank you so much for being with us tonight. I'm proud of all of the leaders and the club members of Gems Not Genocide for all the work that you've done in raising money and, most importantly, raising awareness to what's happening in our world. Not only do you inspire your peers, but you really do inspire your parents. We're very proud of the work that you guys are doing. Our mission tonight is unique. Of course, we want you all to go home tonight with a deeper understanding of human rights violations and the genocide that exists right now under a cloak of dark silence. Some of these stories, most of them, have just fallen from the headlines. We don't see them anymore, but they're happening out there, as you'll see tonight. But what we don't want to do is tell you about the genocide and have you sort of throw your hands up in the air and go home and feel paralyzed about how you can help from your safe little corner of the world. Most importantly tonight, we want to empower you. Our guests will give you tools and ideas that you will need to make your voices heard and to truly create change and to help expose the dark secrets that leave thousands of refugees without any hope. You have more power than you know. Many of you are young, and you are our future leaders of this country and this world. And tonight, our guests are going to help teach you how to channel your power so that you can go back to your schools, to your communities, to your churches, to your synagogues, to any clubs you belong to, and you can share the knowledge that you gained tonight and spread the word as true leaders. Let me tell you a little bit about the format of our night. We will hear from our keynote speaker. He's amazing. I've spent a couple of days browsing his website, and I'm just blown away by his work, and I know you will be too. He's award-winning journalist, photojournalist Ron Haviv, and we are very lucky to have you with us tonight, Ron. You'll actually have a unique opportunity to ask Ron your questions, so as he's speaking, whatever pops into your mind, hold on to it, because we're going to be running around the audience with a microphone tonight, and you'll get to ask Ron your questions. Now, after our Q&A with Ron, we're going to take a quick break out in the lobby. There'll be snacks and drinks. The restrooms are out there to the right. And in our lobby, you'll notice some of our Gems Not Genocide young members selling jewelry. And I have to give a plug for my daughter here because she's very kind of quiet about it, but she sits for hours and hours and hours with such passion and concentration, literally hours, to make, this is one of my favorites. I'm gonna, if nobody buys it tonight, Sam, it's mine, I'm gonna buy it. She makes jewelry along with her team of Gems Not Genocide members, and they sell the jewelry with all of the proceeds going to Gems Not Genocide, thus the name GEMS. A lot of what they do is sell jewelry, Gems Not Genocide. So please browse the jewelry, buy something. Mother's Day's coming up. I do love this bracelet, guys. And the members will also be happy to accept your donations tonight if you'd like to make a donation. And all this money, where does it go? It goes actually toward putting on events like tonight. And there'll be another very wonderful auction and gala coming up that Gems Not Genocide is holding. And all the money they raise allows them to reach you guys and to tell you what's happening in the world. Finally, we will hear from our esteemed 5 panelists, and then we're actually going to break out into small sessions with them so you can learn and dialogue more about your area of interest in a more intimate setting. You'll have a chance to rotate, hopefully time depending, between 2 different groups with our panelists. Now, just a couple of housekeeping things to tell you. If you haven't already silenced your cell phones, please do that right now. And be mindful tonight that the event is being videotaped. We are going to begin our evening with a brief introduction video that will shed light on part of the conflict in Darfur. This video has been donated by our guest, Nimat Ahmadi. She's one of our speakers here tonight on behalf of the organization that she founded, Darfur Women Action Group.
Hardship are an almost daily ritual for the people of Darfur.
Those forced from their villages fled over the border to Chad or to makeshift camps within Darfur itself.
Hundreds of thousands of people live in refugee camps across the region. Women and girls are common targets, and there's no sign of that changing.
Over 4,000 villages were being burned down, erased from the earth.
The Janjaweed came and burned them all alive, as well as thrown the children to the fire. 5 different men raped me.
Genocide has ravaged Sudan. Thousands have been murdered. And women and girls face some of the most widespread and systematic sexual violence the modern world has seen. To understand their story, we must first understand where it begins. Sudan is the largest country in Africa, and Darfur, an area about the size of France, lies in the western region of the country. In 2003, after decades of neglect, drought, and oppression, 2 groups that represent agrarian farmers mounted a rebellion against Sudan's president, Omar al-Bashir. President Bashir's response? Devastating assault on the civilian population of ethnic groups identified with the rebels. Men, women, and children. To assist in their scorched earth campaign, the Sudanese government armed and trained a militia known as the Janjaweed. Working together, the Sudanese government and the Janjaweed wiped out entire villages, destroyed food and water supplies, and systematically murdered, tortured, and raped civilians. Over 2.5 million people have fled their homes and now live in dangerous camps where they are still attacked.
Raping, killing, burning, and the world is watching. in Darfur, rape being used as a weapon of war.
Multiple rapes to the same woman. Some of them died out of rape.
Five different men, they attacked me, they raped me, and they cut me in different parts of my body with a knife, and they burned cigarettes in my body. The rape is very, very difficult something for me. The militia attacked a school of girls in North Darfur. They raped 40 girls with their teachers. They were bleeding. I saw them, they were tortured. Why they raped them? They are children, they were children, just children.
Before this crisis in Darfur started and the genocide started, women were well respected and were more secure. But this is no longer the case. Right now, women could turn from most secure in our society to the most vulnerable.
In traditional Darfuri society, women hold a place of honor in the family and adhere to a strict code of devotion and chastity.
In my family, in my small family, the top decision maker was my eldest aunt. It's not my father even.
The women in Darfur are completely 100% Muslims, and so they are very religious. And chastity was a value, big value in Darfur.
When someone rapes a woman, they rape her entire tribe. It's considered, in the traditional sense, to be the deepest affront. By raping a woman in front of her male relatives, it ensures the destruction of that family's, the fabric of that family.
This is not by accident. Rape is sponsored, sanctioned, and condoned by the Sudanese government. As part of a systematic campaign, Sudanese government forces and the Janjaweed use sexual violence as a tool of intimidation and terror. Tragically but predictably, sexual violence is now endemic in Darfur. Years of continued insecurity have led to an increase in opportunistic rape by a multitude of actors, all of whom operate with total impunity.
When they step out from the camps looking for water or firewood, they experience the act of risking their life to being raped again and again.
كم راجل اليوم في مكان كنت مكان 6
kawan tertiri ko kuran karas ko inte ko kirimu ti ko ilo tabar ka karas waka amadu sige ko le ara to singi mi inta timu musafo ya ni ko le ka en ko jimma ka ko tar ko dinga kira muri mari ke mere inta mana ko ure lakin e lo ko la
شغل ده انا كنت بقول لك ولا كنت بشغل ولا بقول له.
Before fleeing to the US, Niamat Ahmadi worked to help rape victims and to change the stigma of shame and silence associated with rape. Now she continues her work in America as an advocate, working with other Sudanese women.
We mobilize ourselves as a group of women to come together and form as a group that can provide help, especially to the rape victim. There's so many girls being left behind because of the shame.
There are very strong traditional beliefs that prevent women from reintegrating into society once it has become known that they have been raped.
Singi maka kimi eri ka ko bayana ko kuruna kaina ka khasar tarte lakin koso karo tara kono ko era do kunu kuno ma ma na made.
So you have to approach the family, the male member of the family or the eldest women in the family to talk to them that this is not their choice, but the act that happened by force.
Despite the violence, suffering, and stigma Darfuri women have endured, they are not helpless.
There are so many stories of how women defend themselves and how they give courage to their men to defend them.
What's great about the Sudanese human rights community is that there is a robust women's movement and a group of very, very dedicated people who work at great risk to themselves.
The work that I'm doing put me in a great risk, and the Sudanese government don't manage to work to stop this genocide.
Because of Niamat's work, the Sudanese government made repeated attempts to kill her.
Sometimes I can fear for my own life, for my own safety. For me, to die is no different than those people who die. But when I remember those who are still imprisoned in the IDPs camps and attacked day and night, I dedicate my life to that foreign women.
As long as there are people who are alive still, and their rights are taken away, we can still reach them.
Let us promise ourselves and hold ourselves back that still there's something we can do to save others, to give hope and to give life to others. We need to hear the voices of women around the world. Any woman, if she have heard about any suffering of another woman, she feels that suffering and she feels the anger. It's good for her to transfer that anger into action.
We can make a difference. Use your voice to end the suffering.
Good evening. This event is timely in that it coincides with several solemn reminders, that of Holocaust Remembrance Day, Yom HaShoah, that of the genocide that began in Rwanda 20 years ago. April is also Sexual Assault Awareness Month, and today is Earth Day. And the question we ask ourselves today is naturally, what's my role? What's our role in this global progress? But really, in the face of all these challenges, one question I believe we should be asking is the question, who am I? And what is it that I'm really capable of? And I can speak to you guys as an educator. As an educator, what I want to say first is that I believe for those of you who are here today, just starting out as a budding community leader or activist, today may be a first step for you. And that is to bear witness to what is happening among your fellow human beings. And having had the courage to come and make the time to understand more and to be aware of more is a very powerful thing, and I'm really grateful that you showed up today. It means a lot to me, it means a lot to us all on behalf of Gems Not Genocide. And as an educator, I can also tell you that schools can do far better in preparing you for solving these big problems. But it's not only because we don't really teach about these problems. I think it's also that we haven't really given you a chance. We haven't really given you enough opportunity to let you try things out and explore so you can answer the question, who am I? And what is it that I'm really capable of? We've perhaps given you the false notion that you must wait for us, teachers, to tell you what you should do next, when in fact you have had what it takes all along. We may have also given you the false notion that success means one thing, and failure is a bad thing, perhaps further making you question your own strengths, when in fact failure is an opportunity. So when you're faced with a big challenge, of course you might say, I have no idea where to begin. I don't want to begin until somebody holds my hand and shows me how. I don't want to begin unless I know the exact right way to do it, which is how we do it in school. So tonight, I hope you feel free from these shackles that stand in the way of your own part in activism. You have to start somewhere, and maybe it is tonight. Because no one's going to hold your hand, and you have to have the courage to get things wrong the first 10 times. If you have compassion for your fellow brothers and sisters around the world, you already have the foundation. You can organize, you can make connections, you can have conversations, so you too can lead because you have a heart. But you have to start somewhere. With this, I'd like to introduce Avery Bernstein. As brilliant and inspirational as she has been to me and to many people who know her, she got this whole thing started simply after watching a movie in 7th grade. And that's it. No one told her how or when to start Gems Not Genocide. She's met some great peers, guides and teachers and leaders along the way and was critical and receptive of all their wisdom along the whole way. But she started somewhere. And she did so by selling jewelry. All she had was inspiration, an idea, and a little bit of courage. And today she's gotten these amazing experts to join us with just a few phone calls and a story. So let's consider this evening a beginning of a more empowering future for every one of us. Avery and the other members of Gems Not Genocide have begun putting this conference together for the first time, hopefully for more years to come. Without further ado, I'm very proud to introduce the founder of Gems Not Genocide, Avery Bernstein.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here tonight. I would like to give you a brief background on why we organized this event. When I was a student in middle school, I saw a documentary that shed light on the atrocities in Darfur and inspired the idea and movement of Gems Not Genocide. Since then, an unbelievable team of Gems Not Genocide students have come together to spread awareness and education about the ongoing conflict in Sudan. I'd like to thank all the speakers who have been incredibly generous with their time in coming to speak with us today. I would also like to thank Vital Voices and the AND Power program who have helped sponsor part of this event and enabled this event to happen. And I'm very grateful that 2 Vital Voices representatives can be here with us tonight. The Gems Not Genocide team spent a lot of time bringing in a group of speakers whose incredible experiences touch on a broad sense of this issue and share with us how this impacts Darfuri lives and our lives. After spending 6 years being a student activist on this issue, I truly believe that education and awareness are the most important factors in creating a sustainable solution to this travesty. Education for the Darfuri refugees and educating ourselves on this issue. This remains our collective mission and the reason that we are here tonight. It is now my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Mr. Ron Haviv. Mr. Haviv is an award-winning photojournalist who masterfully captures images of conflict and humanitarian crisis around the globe. He is the founder of Seven, a photo agency that is dedicated to documenting conflict and producing a visual record of the injustices that he has seen. He has also worked with Doctors Without Borders, UNICEF, and the Red Cross in creating multi-platform projects. You may have seen him on ABC, NBC, or BBC speaking about his work. Through photography, art, and activism, Mr. Haviv has made a positive impact in Sudan by bringing the conflict to our doorstep and changing the way we view and understand the world. I am very grateful and honored to introduce Mr. Ron Haviv.
Well, thank you, Avery. It's a real pleasure to be here. And thank you for your persistent emails, phone calls, skywriting, presents, and other things that you sent to get me here. I am quite pleased to be part of this because this is one of the key things from my photography is to be able to bring it in front of people and especially to bring it to students, because I think that is an incredibly important aspect of my photography. Most of us remember the famous refrain from World War II in reference to the Holocaust, the refrain stating, "Never again, never again." Possibly some of you here have just learned this in class. When the leaders of the time were asked why they let it happen, the answer was, well, we didn't know it was happening, but never again, never again. In my 25 years of being a photographer, I've documented now 3 genocides. 3 genocides that have happened live in front of us by television, photography, writing, radio, print. One took a few months in Rwanda, one a few years in Bosnia, and one still going on today in Darfur. What happened to the refrain, the promises that your parents, your grandparents in some cases, made to the world? Why is it necessary today that we are talking still about genocide? The answer is, I'm not really sure I have some ideas, I have some thoughts, but this is a question for all of us to continue to ponder. Why does this still continue? All I can really say is one of the reasons that we are here is the hope that as many of you go out into the world, you will do so better educated and more aware of your responsibilities as a member of the human race. My role as a photographer is to provide the images that will stay in your mind, images that will turn numbers like 800,000 dead, millions of refugees, or 13 years of war into the reality that they are. The faces of people. People who may or may not look like you, people who may or may not speak the same language as you, but people who are all connected to each other. My work has been used by the International Criminal Court in The Hague to indict and convict participants in war crimes. The work, which often failed to stop a war, still had some results, although too late. For that I am somewhat satisfied, but certainly not satisfied enough. As I said before, we have watched genocide live. We've watched people dying. We watch people dying today, and we continue with our lives as though we are not affected. So while my work holds those in the images responsible for their actions, it is imperative for us to hold ourselves responsible as well. Living in a democracy where many of you can and others will eventually be able to vote and make your voices heard is part of that responsibility. The leaders of this country and others, when they know that they have an educated constituency, they will hopefully act better and be more responsible. We are all part of that formula. In 2005, I went to Darfur to cover the conflict, been going on for almost 2 years at that time. And I went to examine what was happening with children. Because it was quite obvious to me that this war was going to continue for quite a long time. And after a certain period, conflict brings in the next generation. And once that happens, it's often very hard to stop the cycle of violence. Before I show some of my images, the photograph that's in your program is of 3 young girls. And I came across these young girls one early morning around 6 a.m. as I was driving around the displacement camp, and I saw these 3 very small figures walking from the camp in the desert. There was nothing in front of them. And as I drove up to them, my translator and I stopped them and we started to talk. And I asked them what they were doing. And as you saw already in the film here, they were going off to get firewood for their family. The international community was providing food, but was not really providing any way to cook the food. So the girls had to go off to find firewood. And one of the girls said their father couldn't do it because if he was caught by the Janjaweed, the feared Arab militia, for certain he would be killed. Their mother couldn't do it because there was a good chance she would be raped. So they were hoping that their youth would protect them on their journey. And as they stood speaking to me, I raised my camera, and the girl in front, dressed so beautifully that she would have people staring at her in the streets of New York, bowed her head down, not in resignation, but in a moment of solitude. The way she held herself spoke of dignity and resilience, the strength of what she and her friends were doing, but also on a greater level, the resilience of the human spirit. Let's take a look at the children of Darfur. So in conclusion, there are two ways to look at this. Are you a half-glass empty kind of person or a half-glass full kind of person? One way is complete hopelessness. There's no way up or out. We continue on the same path as our ancestors and are doomed to continue to repeat the same mistakes. Syria is raging, Central African Republic is collapsing, and Ukraine is about to be cut in half. This is just the headlines for today. The other way is to say, it's interesting that we're all saying similar things. Perhaps we're all more alike than different. Perhaps there can be a commonality amongst us. Perhaps what happens in Kabul affects New York. What happens in Pennsylvania affects Kigali. What happens in Kigali affects Cairo. Maybe there are ways to work together. It is always my hope, however incremental it might be, that the work that you have seen and will continue to see will remain in your mind, will remind you when you walk into the voting booth, decide to donate funds to this cause or that cause, to buy a cell phone that's not made with minerals from a war zone, to log on to the Enough website and learn something more. Simply make sure that you are an educated participant of life, that there is a reason for my going out into the world to be your eyes. Thank you very much.
Jason sets up some chairs for us. Ron and I are going to have a nice, casual, intimate sit down, and we're going to have an opportunity to ask you your questions. So while we get organized, I have to ask you, you bring us these photographs, and you have your website, you share the photos in many ways. How do people react other than with, like my little son who's 7 years old just said to me, "It's so sad, Mommy, I wish I could bring them food." He's 7 years old. Adults probably react in the same way, but does it actually prompt people to help? Are you making change with your photos?
Well, I think I'm not making change that I am stopping the idea of war, but on that level where someone says, "Can I send food?" Just by somebody saying that and donating money to Doctors Without Borders or UNICEF or something like that, where you can actually have an immediate effect, that's a pretty amazing thing for me to be part of that chain, where from my photograph to somebody to all of a sudden affecting somebody's life overseas, or even in this country as well, is incredibly important. So there is, I think, often we as Americans think that it's either all or nothing, but I think that when you think like you can actually affect somebody's life for the better, even one person, that's a pretty amazing thing to be able to do.
You must feel pretty good about what you do every day.
Hi, I was wondering if the international community at this point in time is doing anything to further protect journalists as they go into situations where they might be targeted, especially those journalists.
It's a good question. She wants to know about protection of international journalists as they go and do what you do. How are they being protected?
Well, there's very little protection. In fact, really starting with the Bosnian War in the mid-90s, journalists have become more and more a target. We're seeing that probably in the most extreme sense in Syria, where just 2 days ago, four French journalists were released. They had been captured, probably I think they were in prison for more than 6 months. People are, combatants and people in these situations are becoming more and more aware of the power of the image and power of information, and they're trying to control it. Today in Ukraine, journalists are being beaten up, arrested by the pro-Russia militias that are taking over control of some of the towns. So it is It is a big fight. It's something that we have to deal with. In Syria, news organizations sent letters to the various, I mean, it's ridiculous as it sounds, but they sent letters to Al-Qaeda and the other groups asking them to stop kidnapping journalists. That's about as much as that can be done. The response was, there was no response, of course, but it is something that we are constantly trying to figure out the best way to be able to tell these people's stories while obviously trying to be able to survive as well.
Any other questions? Any other questions for Ron? She's got one here. And then
I know this is difficult to quantify, but having been to Rwanda, Serbia, and Darfur, did one see more violence? I mean, did you feel more threatened, or did the violence seem more gratuitous in any of the three conflicts?
It is very hard to quantify. I think it's very hard to compare tragedy to tragedy. I mean, obviously, there are statistics where Rwanda still, unfortunately, or fortunately, hasn't been repeated. Rwanda has the most victims. And with Rwanda, there wasn't a lot of threats towards journalists. In Bosnia, Serbia became greater. Darfur, it was more just being arrested. But the atrocities, it kind of amazes me in each one of these conflicts how human beings think of other ways to torture each other. And that is becoming more and more brutal. I think Syria is probably, at this point, the most brutal things are happening in Syria today.
there are two ladies in the back.
Hi, so just to elaborate on the previous question, so I noticed that you took pictures of the gender week. Were you threatened at all when that happened, or?
You know, meeting the Gender Week was probably something like it would be like meeting an alien. They kind of came up on horseback. I walked up to them, tried to engage in a conversation so I could photograph them. They stared at me like, "What are you doing here and what are you?" And I looked at them like, "I know who you are, and you guys are killers." But they never responded to my questions. They just stared at me. The whole encounter probably lasted no more than a couple of minutes, and they luckily just galloped off. But it was a very an odd interaction with them for sure.
Is that Leah? Leah has a question. She's in Kane.
So what was the event that you had that made you want to go out and do something and visit the places where all these atrocities were happening?
One of the photographs that you saw in the second presentation was of a man in a white shirt covered in blood fighting another man who was trying to hit him with a pipe. That man was the vice president-elect of Panama. And that photograph was taken after the dictator, General Manuel Noriega, nullified the elections, and he tried to, the vice president tried to get people on the street to overthrow the government. And that photograph wound up on the cover of Time and Newsweek and US News and many other places. And 6 months later, when the United States invaded Panama, the president of the United States spoke about the photograph as one of the reasons why the US was invading. And when I heard that speech, I realized the power of photography. I didn't believe that we were invading because of one photograph, but it was an understanding all of a sudden that the work that I could do to play this role in communication, information, and in education. So that started to kind of push me into the world of photography. A few years later, another image from that series you saw, it was of the Serbian soldier kicking 3 dying Bosnian Muslims. Those were amongst the first people to die in the war in Bosnia. And those photographs were published, and they were visual evidence to prove to the world that if there wasn't intervention immediately, this war was going to happen, and was going to be very brutal. There was no intervention. The war started, several 100,000 people were killed, millions became displaced, and led to several other wars. And that understanding of the failure of that photograph to have any reaction from the world community put another sort of foundation in my desire to do this work, is that I felt the responsibility to go and tell these stories, to show the world what was happening, and to hopefully hold people accountable for their actions, or lack of actions.
In the back here, someone has their hand up.
Hello? Have there ever been any follow-up studies, or where are the children who witnessed all these atrocities for all these years? Are they, what happens to them as they become adults?
That's a good question. I don't know those statistics, but I'm pretty sure if you go to Save the Children and UNICEF that there are plenty of studies there. I can say for sure that the majority of the children that you saw in the Darfur piece are still in displacement camps where I photographed them.
And I think some of our guests that will speak later who actually hail from this area may be able to answer those questions because they were in those camps themselves. Any other questions? Yes, we have, you're in green and then you're next in red, okay?
Do you ever show your photos in international countries, whether it be developed or developed nations that have community status others?
Most of this work has traveled around the world. My work from Yugoslavia has gone back to Yugoslavia. People in the photographs have seen the photographs. People that knew people or survived during those conflicts have seen it. The work from Darfur, myself and a group of other photographers created a project called Darfur, and we took our work around the world and we projected on the front of museum buildings and government institutions. We brought it to where government officials were meeting about Darfur and basically tried to find other ways for the public to be able to interact with the work, so both in the United States, in Europe, and in Africa as well.
Okay, as the microphone makes its way down here to the young man in red, I have to ask you, because when I think of the Holocaust, there were so many people that said that never happened. That's nonsense. 6 million Jews weren't killed. That wasn't real. Have you ever had that reaction from anyone to any of your photos suggesting that there was embellishment or that wasn't real or that you dramatized something?
I've had that a number of times, especially with my work from Yugoslavia, from Bosnia, especially where on the Serbian side they deny that the photographs are real. They say that I'm making it up, that I'm lying. In fact, actually, it was quite interesting. I took my exhibition to Serbia. We took the captions off the photographs and had the Serbian public write what they thought was going on in the photographs. And there was a documentary made about this called Vivisect. And in one scene in the film, there's a man going through a very complicated statement about how this photograph of blood in the snow and how it was propaganda and how it was an obvious example of the world was against Serbia, and had he actually known the true caption of the picture was of Serbian victims that had been killed by the KLA. So it's quite interesting in that respect, but also in a bigger thing in that we as photographers, because of Photoshop and now everybody sees how easy it is to manipulate photography on your phone or on your iPad, that it's becoming harder and harder for us to prove that this work is true and a proper representation of what we saw.
Sure, it's frustrating for you. Your question.
Yeah, those who commit the actual genocide, from what you've seen, are they more evil than the rest of us, or are they just like products of circumstance?
I think that's a very good question, and it's one of the things that, one of the reasons why I put together the quotes is because if you actually read the quotes before you know who said them, you can say like, oh, that must be so-and-so saying it, but all of a sudden it's a US senator, or it's a it's an LA gang member, or so I think a lot of for me, a lot of what everything comes down to is this concept of fear and what a human being will do if they fear for their own life and if they fear for their family. And people will go to extraordinary lengths to justify their violence, and a lot of it is preventative. Like, I'm going to kill that family because at some point I think they're going to come and kill my family. So I think that there is, a lot of it is, we're all capable of certain acts of violence if you're put in the right circumstance. And there are people that are, without question, more evil or more criminal-minded, but try and put yourself in the position of some of these people and think, like, where would you draw the line on stopping if you had to defend yourself and, more importantly, defend your family?
Yeah, it's like the worst case of schoolyard bullying gone awry, and it's contagious.
It absolutely is, and when I show this presentation, especially when I show my work to kids in inner city schools where gang activity is very prevalent, they immediately they understand this because it's their life, but just extended. Because it's really what we're talking about in all these situations is we're talking about gangs. Gangs and tribes. We're together and we're against these people. I mean, it's taking cliques to the next level to gangs and gangs to the next level to militias and armies and so on.
Well, from seeing your photographs and hearing from you firsthand tonight, we really recognize your bravery when you take that camera around the world to share with us. Thank you for being so brave.
Thank you very much.
Well, I think the program's been fantastic so far, and we have so much more to look forward to. What we really have to look forward to right now is a musical treat. Ron Haviv's images really captivate us with the art of photography. Well, Harriton Jr., Bin Park, there he is. His expressive musical talents capture and evoke deep feelings in us as well. His vehicle is the cello. Ron's is his camera. This event inspired Bin to play this piece for us. And let me just tell you, Bin is a young art scholar. That is a very, very prestigious honor. On the piano, we're lucky to have Deborah Lou Harder. Bin and Deborah, thank you, and take it away. Ben and Deborah, that was beautiful, and it does evoke a passion and a feeling and a fire inside of us. Very, very beautiful. I'm so glad that we have it's kind of a last minute decision and a real treat that they decided to join us here tonight, so thank you. I had a parent come up to me during that 5-minute break and she said, I hope you can deliver on your promise tonight of not only showing the plight of these refugees and these victims, but giving our young people some ammunition, if you will, some ideas, some ways to channel their desire to help. Our panel of speakers is really going to do the best that they can tonight to tell you the ways that you can help make change in the world. I was reading on one website and the advice was, write your congressman, send a check. Those are absolutely good things. And one of the things said, pray. And while prayer is good, it's not enough. Let me introduce to you the first of our panel of 5 outstanding guests. First, I'll introduce Hawa Mohammed Salih. Hawa hails from North Darfur. Hawa and her family were forced to flee their home village in 2003 due to fighting between Darfuri rebels and government forces. She spent much of her adult life, young adult life I should say, she was a very young woman, in what is known as internally displaced persons camps, or IDPs, where she emerged as a prominent voice for the IDPs. As you will hear though, Hawa's advocacy did not go unpunished. Hawa, please take the stage.
It's my very great honor to be here this evening with you. And thank you for inviting to speak to you this afternoon.
And I think all of us, you have mentioned that this month is a month for prevention genocide, a month to stand against genocide. Very special thanks to the lady that we are always saying our history as Darfur history and Sudan history will keep her in the page. That's the lady who always organized, and she's organized this event to be happened. Especially also her family member and all the students and parents and everyone who attend this event. I am always saying how this world and how the people in this world as family. So you look, the lady who she's in the other side of the other world, and the parents and the family and group, of course, they give him voice to thousands of the people voice. I'm Hawa Saleh, and since I'm here, actually I tell everyone that I now have two homes. Home that's raising me up and born me, and home saved my life. So that means I have home in Sudan, and the second home is United States of America. So such proud of that. And I like both of them. Tonight we are here. Let me brief you a little bit about who I am. I'm Hawa Saleh. I raised and born in Darfur. It's in a very small village called Tina. It's in western Jabal Mara. With my 9 brothers and sisters. My father was a businessman, and my mom, she took care about my family. And we had a good life. It's very secure. That's what our sister in her video mentioned. That's Nemat. Thank you so much, Nemat, and all you've done and everything you do. In 2003, everything completely in my life changed. In 2003, the year that's why I graduated high school, but unfortunately, the Janjaweed and the militia of the government of Sudan destroyed totally my village. More than 50 people were killed just in my village. And my extended family, I lost 100 members of the family. And we are forced to become as a refugee in the camps. That's the place I dedicate all my young life to fight for women's rights and to give voice for the million of the people whom today many people they give them voice. We are here tonight to tell you the systematic killing and the raping for the women is still ongoing on. We are here to tell you the militia of the government of Sudan as a Janjaweed, there is still destruction of the village. This is new year as 2014. There is more than 100,000 people, they just flew their house because the village bombed and the people killed and the women as raping and still rape as the weapons. As in the 21st century, the women raping as a group in front of their family and their parents. We are here today to tell you just last month, more than 127 villages were bombed and still bombing up today. We are here today to bring tensions and to let every one of you who have felt that all the people as family, as we are today as family and as friends. Many people, and thank you so much, Ron, he mentioned everywhere, the people saying never again, never again. I was lucky since 1.5 years when I was in the United States here. I was living with a Jewish family. And they are dealing with me the same like family member. That was so much proud. And in the same time, it's because we are all have experience of how the genocide is bad. The people say never again, never again. I traveled to 17 states around the country, and the people say never again, but still again, again. What does it mean to every one of you who have heart and have feeling and like and respect the human being and respect the human rights? We are here in the country of the United States here. We are so lucky, and especially me, I'm so lucky. Because I never believed that I could survive. And the last time, because of my activism, and because of my fight and fighting on behalf of women and behalf of millions of the people, I was sentenced to death. I never believed that I could survive. But you will do a little different things. It will make many change and many difference to millions of people's life. We are here today, and all you see, movies, videos, that is still happening. We're here again to ask all of you, students, family members, teachers, activists, all people, organizations, everyone, get action, get educated about that food. As especially students, we know how the education system will make difference in the life of everyone. As you all of you know, how the education is important. Without education, we can't change this world. And especially my encouragement today to all young ladies, especially young ladies, come up front, fight for women's rights. Give the voice of the million of people that want voices from you. Give them a voice. Just stand up. Write petitions or sign to your congressman or to your representative, asking them what's going on in Darfur and in Sudan. It's genocide. Should stop. Today again, the second phase of genocide, starvation. Since the all humanitarian organization was expelled and blocked by the government of Sudan, the people dying with no food. The people dying with no medical assistance. So the starvations became the second phase of genocide. Please, stand up. We are here, and for me this is the second speech in this school, Harrington High School. And all Harrington High School, our history will make, we will put them in the page. I'm telling you about, that's so right. Since I leave my family and I'm here, I'm still advocating day and night. It's very difficult for me even to sleep. Most of the time I am crying. I'm feeling like no one cries with me. How 400,000 people were killed. 2 million people displaced. And still, this 100,000 people through their house. So who is stand with me? Please stand up. Please support our sisters. Please support one of the organizations that fight for women's rights. And as you saw the pictures and movies, please move forward. Go ahead. Let me stop here. And any questions about the foreign, about genocide, sometimes it's very hard even to talk. It's very hard, everything to say that, because it's really very hard. And the criminal, as the government of Sudan, is still free. 1,000 women is raped, but the criminal is still free, still moving, still traveling. I was a member of the one organization called the Alliance of Sudanese, an American organization called it Act for Sudan. This Act for Sudan is found around the country here to tell the governments of the United States of America, the government of Sudan is a criminal and is wanted by ICC. This government is should to face justice, but is still free. Last couple of months, the United States government, and there was some conference was taken place in New York about the UN, and Sudan, of course, is a member of United Nations. He get permission to come to attend the United Nations conference in New York. All the activists around the country here, they stand up. They say, this country, United States country, the country of human rights, the country of in Washington, D.C., there is a lot of places, as a museum call it, never again. How this government is gonna come in United States of America? And we are here. We are lucky that, and they know that if they come in United States here, they're gonna arrest it by international community. They're gonna arrest it by ICC. So they failed to come. But we still fight day and night on behalf of we people and behalf of the million of the women, and because of peace, because of justice, stand up. Thank you so much, and thank you everyone.
So Howard told us that she's been to Harrington twice. Her English was pretty good the first time. It was very good tonight. She's doing a beautiful job communicating to us the plight of what's happening at home. I'm going to introduce our other guest. I also want to tell you that in addition to putting on events like this, Gems on Genocide, I want to make sure that you learn this tonight, presented a very sizable check last year to a Darfur organization to help build a computer room for female refugees in Darfur that not only didn't have computers before, they didn't have toilets. They had holes in the ground in which they relieved themselves. So this is the first school of its kind called the Ganji High School. So these kids are making a difference, and it's grassroots efforts like this that are going to make life better for these refugees. Our next guest is Victoria Christensen. Vicki is a Philadelphia attorney advisor for Equitas, the prosecutor's resource on violence against women. Ms. Christensen's legal career has been dedicated to protecting the rights of women and children who have been victims of sexual and physical abuse. Victoria, thanks for being with us.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. When we were preparing to to speak at Harridan. Dan and Avery did a wonderful job of reminding us that we were going to be speaking to an audience of some middle schoolers, some elementary schoolers, high schoolers, kids in college, beyond. And Dan really challenged us to answer the question, who am I? What am I capable of? And I think sometimes when you come to a forum, you come to an event, and you see in a program a list of speakers who have advanced degrees or who have been working in the field for 20 years, you put them in a box. This is the attorney, this is the photojournalist, this is the survivor activist. And it seems as if they're very far away and that they're only this title, this box. And what I hope to communicate to you is that the definition of who am I, what am I capable of, is not going to be answered until the end of your life. And up and until that point, you've got to challenge yourself. You've got to educate yourself, and you've got to stop running away from the fire and get off your butt and run into it. To talk about issues, sexual assault, rape, genocide, are extremely difficult. They're difficult issues for us to wrap our heads around. Why do these things happen? Who is capable of these things? So I challenge each of you, if this is something that speaks to you, if this is something you're interested in, issues you care about, run into the fire. Educate yourself and educate others. So tonight I want to briefly talk to you a little bit about rape and rapists. Who rapists are, what rape is, why rapists rape, and how rapists rape, and how rape is used as a weapon of war. I work for an agency called Equitas. Equitas is a nonprofit in Washington, D.C. Our main mission is to evaluate and refine the way that the criminal justice system responds to cases of violence against women. So we're talking about intimate partner violence, sexual assault, stalking, and human trafficking. Every single person on our staff, with the exception of our administrative staff, is a former prosecutor. So we've all been in the trenches. We've worked on cases of physical and sexual child abuse. We've worked on cases involving rapes of men, women, adults, elderly persons. We have handled cases where babies were severely burned by their parents, by their caregivers. And what we try to do is take our experiences and study the research very carefully, also get information anecdotally from those working in the field, and educate allied criminal justice professionals on how to better respond to these kinds of cases. So let's first talk about what is rape. Rape, I'm going to sort of go clinical for you so that you have a context of really what we're talking about. State, nationally, and then around the world. So in Pennsylvania, we have 3 main criminal statutes that tell us the definition and what elements constitute these crimes. Rape, essentially, is penetration, however slight, of the mouth, the vagina, or the anus by a sexual organ, and there are some statutes that also include objects or digital penetration. And Pennsylvania is unique in that rape is penetration however slight plus force, and sexual assault is penetration however slight plus non-consent. And I'm certainly going to talk about those issues a little bit later this evening. Nationally, I put up the Uniform Crime Report because many of you might have heard that the FBI very significantly changed the way that it collects data on sexual assault and rape in early 2013. And essentially what the FBI had done since the 1920s prior to January 1st of 2013 was define rape only as penis and vagina, male on female. That was it. So if a sexual assault or a rape was committed that didn't fall under that umbrella, it wasn't counted by the FBI in its uniform crime report. So anyone picking up that report, trying to get a sense of national statistics, would see a very, very, very small number. The FBI report and the FBI definition, and certainly definitions across the country of what elements constitute sexual assault and rape, are pretty much in line with the United Nations definition. Penetration, however slight. And what's wonderful is that the United Nations has actually specified that rape, sexual assault includes physical force, and also penetration, however slight, achieved via coercion. Coercion. And if there's one thing we're going to take away tonight about coercion, it's that it negates consent. Whenever coercion is present in a situation, consent is nullified. So who are rapists? Rapists come in three categories that I want to talk about, and certainly these are not mutually exclusive. The overwhelming majority of rapists are male, and they are non-strangers. They are acquaintances, they are friends, they are intimate partners, they are family members. They maintain normal relationships, and I put normal in quotes. And just visualize train tracks, okay? And I think a lot of us would like to believe that rapists are on one, and that people who have normal sexual relationships are on the other. That's completely untrue. Rapists maintain normal sexual relationships, and sometimes the rape and the normal relationship intersect, and sometimes they continue to run parallel. And finally, rapists are serial offenders. The overwhelming majority of our rapists will rape multiple victims across his lifespan. One of the greatest researchers on offenders, on sex offenders, is a man named David Lisak. And in a study that he conducted, 120 men were found to have committed 483 acts of rape or attempted rape. Serial offenders. So as David Lisak says in his research, the identification of one rapist is a golden opportunity for us, for all of us, to protect a community, to protect society, to protect future victims. Ben, thank you. Why do rapists rape? There's no one answer to this, and I think part of what could be confusing for us is to take the answer of why rapists rape, and we're talking about an individual level, and we carry it all the way up to genocide. We carry it all the way up to rape as a weapon of war. Rapists rape for many, many different reasons. Power, control, humiliation, degradation of victims. They eroticize rape. They fantasize about it. They want to use it to terrorize others. They also use it to intimidate. We see this often. We see rape often co-occur with other crimes. For example, a lot of you, I'm sure, have at this point thought a lot about, studied a lot about human trafficking. And particularly in our labor trafficking cases, we also see this, of course, in our sex trafficking cases. But rape is used by the traffickers as a method of intimidation, as a way to show a victim, I'm in charge of you, I'm in control, don't you dare. And to send that same message to other witnesses and other victims. I'm in charge. So how is rape used as a weapon of war? I think Hawa talked a lot about this before, but essentially it's designed to destroy not only the women, not only the children, but the very fiber and fabric of their communities. It's the easiest weapon for them to use. It's the most prolific weapon used now in war. And it destroys the trajectory of the lives of everyone it touches. Ben, thank you. So what can you do? This is really why we're here tonight. There are a few things. You can continue to learn the truth about rape. You can focus on offenders and a knowledge that they manipulate, that they are predators, that everything they do is by design, that in their minds they have a goal, and that goal is to humiliate, that goal is to penetrate, and they're going to try to find a victim whom they think they can victimize. They think this is somebody who I can take advantage of, whom I can isolate, whom I can coerce. And they do that by design so that they can effectuate the penetration at the conclusion. You can also talk about it. Don't put yourself in a rapist's shoes. That's not possible. Put him in his shoes when you're trying to contextualize, when you're trying to understand a set of facts and circumstances. Put that rapist in his own shoes. Respond in an offender-focused, victim-centered manner. What does that actually mean? So being offender-focused means hearing about an incident of rape and really focusing on what that offender did in order to be able to commit it. Whether his weapon was a knife or alcohol, whether he used the audience, and the audience is both the victim and you, to be able not only to commit the rape, but to get away with it. And we've got to be focused on holding rapists accountable. We've got to do this in a victim-centered way. Victim-centered means that we're acknowledging the central role that victims should play throughout the entire process of not only their healing, of course, but our response to the crime. And finally, intervene as a bystander. You know, sometimes for those of you who travel to the metro in DC, what's the slogan? See it, say it. If you see something that doesn't look right, that feels wrong to you in your gut, and you all have one, do something about it. Get up, out of your seat, walk away from the person you're talking to, and walk your friend home. Make sure that she gets home and that she's all right. And then go and talk to the person who is making you uncomfortable in your gut. Hold that person accountable for his behavior. Support your friends and continue to talk about it. That's the only way that we are going to be able to fight this problem individually, communally, and around the world. Thank you. Victoria, thank you. Our next speaker is Nimat Ahmadi. She escaped Sudan after 2 attempts on her life. She nearly died because of her activism opposing the genocide and grave human rights abuses in Darfur. As Director of Global Partnerships and a native of North Darfur, Nimat is a strong and vocal opponent against genocide and mass atrocities worldwide. In 2008, President George W. Bush recognized her as one of 8 global human rights fighters for freedom of their people. Let's welcome Nimat Ahmadi.
Good evening, everybody. I am very delighted to be with you here today to share with you about my own story and the stories of so many others who have been devastated and still suffering in Darfur today. As said, my name is Nimat Ahmadi, and I'm from a small village in North Darfur called Cape Kabia. We have a famous saying that says, a woman has no enemy. That means women were well respected, and as a male member of the family or the society, or even if you are a passerby, you are expected to provide protection for a woman if she can ever be at risk. So that notion today does not exist for our people in Darfur. The women have been targeted for this reason, to break down our culture and to strip away our dignity. Women are constantly raped and tortured in Darfur today. The female went from being the most secure, as I mentioned in that video, to the most vulnerable in our society today. You cannot trust anyone but your family. It is hard for me to imagine how things could have changed so drastically, yes, in a few years. I want to share with you a bit of my life before the genocide began in Darfur. I lived in a big extended family of 10 people. Life in my hometown was so beautiful. Everyone helping one another, even if they met you for the first time. And I was the only daughter in my family to be able to go to college. Most of my sisters, they were married after finishing high school. So I was so happy that I'm able to go to college so that I can come back and pay for my community. When I was leaving high school, going to college, everyone was happy. The entire area and the family, the people in my town were celebrating. I wasn't educated by my family. I was educated by the entire community. Everyone was very supportive. They understand what does it mean to send a girl from Darfur to Khartoum to study. I went to Khartoum and I have seen the disparities between Darfur and Khartoum and how much our people were contributing to the country and the country is giving nothing back. That even has motivated me so much to go back and help my family. I started my activism when I was in high school. During my college time I had more opportunity to come back and serve and volunteer for local organizations that are serving in my city. And I can't wait for myself to graduate to come back to help my community because the community has helped me a lot. Upon my graduation, I decided to come back to Darfur, even though it wasn't a priority for people who go to college because there's no much opportunities in Darfur. But I was determined that my people need my help. I came back and I was lucky to find a job with international organization. I would travel around and give training, capacity building, awareness raising, training women extension agents for villages, and training teachers to teach at kindergarten. The villagers were so happy. Whenever we traveled, they opened their houses to me and my colleague. They served us with food, and they treated us just like their daughters. Unfortunately, when the crisis started, I saw all of those people who I visited with them and treated me very well, just like their daughters. They are roaming the street in my hometown. And I was so helpless, I couldn't do anything to help them. One day, I was traveling to outside of my hometown, Kabkabia, to give training to a village development committee. We approached the first village. We had our meeting and it was successfully ended, so we moved to the next village. Coming back tomorrow, in our way, we stopped by the village that we just left and their life was normal. We saw people were frantic, so many people wounded, and their bodies were thrown on the ground. We stopped and asked the people, what is this? They told us they saw the army coming, people in uniform. They welcomed them like the way you might just welcome your soldier. They served them with food and water under the shadow of the trees. Then, in a few minutes, the soldiers start looting and taking the valuables from the villagers. And one man asked him, why you are doing this? So he immediately shot the man in his head and started shooting randomly everyone in the village and setting on the fire in their houses. So that is how it was started. To me, it was very shocking. We didn't know what to do. We only have one small pickup car. We picked whoever we were able to pick them, to take them to the hospital in Kapkabia. But we were going and I was looking back. I wasn't able to cry. It was a very shocking situation. These are the people, you were laughing with them, you were eating with their food, and you were just, everything was just normal. We came in the checkpoint before I get to my hometown. We met the security people. We reported the incidents. We were warned and told not to tell anybody. We took these wounded people to the hospital, and the security, or the government security, ordered the doctor to release them without treatment. Until today, I don't know what happened to those people. That was the last day for us to work on development, and the organization ceased its operation. I stayed home for a week. One day in the morning, my mom woke me up. Wake up. I asked her what's happening. She said, look around. I looked up and I have seen the smoke coming from all different parts of my hometown. I ran out. I could see the fire. It's about 0.3 miles. You see the people running and see that in that day, about 50 villages in the surrounding areas of my hometown were completely destroyed. You see children as young as 5 years and 7 years old running barefoot. You see people, women running naked. These people were attacked in the middle of the night by the Kinjili. So immediately people in the city start collecting food, medicine, and receiving these people, trying to find home for them. The government immediately accused those people who are helping that they are obstructing peace in the city. They arrested about 50 men. Among them was my brother, my uncles, my cousins. About 10 people are my immediate family. It was very frustrating, but you can't sit and watch. It wasn't safe for us, but we, a group of women, came together and created something called mobile meeting, because it wasn't allowed for Darfuri to meet at a time 3 or 4 people at a time. So 2 of us could go to different directions to get information about where there are new people coming from out of the town, collecting money and clothing and medicine, and finding places, going knocking door after door. Do you have a space for a family or for 2 people or for a child to be able to accommodate those people? The government accuses that we are obstructing peace, and I was threatened. Many more of our friends who were working were threatened and forced to leave. One day I was walking with 2 women while assisting these families. There was a woman that her husband was detained, and she was supposed to give birth to a child. Her husband was building the house the same day. They were doing maintenance in their house, and he invited people because meetings were prohibited. So he was accused that he was gathering people, and then they all were arrested, and the woman was about to give birth out in the street because the house wasn't finished, rebuilt. So we found a place for her while I was walking back in front of the mosque by the market with 2 other women. A masked man grabbed me from my scarf and started choking me from behind. He pulled me into his direction, and I was pulling myself the opposite direction to break his hand free. The 2 women ran away. I thought they were getting help for me. They never came back. Around the corner of my eye, I saw a pickup truck of this government army. I screamed for help. No one did anything, but they stared at me. And the man reached into his knife underneath his arm. I reached his mask, so he started running away. I recognized that he must have been a local Hindu that recruited by the government to kill me because they want to stop the work that we were doing to help the people. So I didn't know that I was such strong and I can struggle for myself. From that day, I didn't know what to do, but I insisted in keep helping our people, even though it wasn't safe for us. Another day, we barely escaped an assassination attempt when I was traveling, accompanying a cousin of mine who was deeply wounded, and there was no medical treatment in the city. His wife could not speak Arabic, so I was told to go with him. In our way traveling in a small car, we hear multiple gunshots. The driver told us to put our head down, and he took another route. So after we took another route, we hear that multiple gunshot, the Janjaweed fire a lot of gunshot behind us. And luckily we were able to run away. But unfortunately, the same day they attacked another small car just like ours. They wounded 7 people and killed a woman. They were thinking it was me. Then my family told me not to come back. It was a very tough decision for me to make. When you see so many people are killed, and you are not an exception. I was very reluctant. I couldn't do that while my family, my mom, my sisters, so many million of people are under attack. But so many people insisted to me. My mom said, Nimad, you are outspoken. If you stay, we may all be killed. And if you leave, I know you will be a voice for us and tell the world about what you have witnessed in Darfur. So with that hope, I left. And I tried my best to be a voice for my people. Luckily, in 2007, I came to the United States and I received my asylum here. I went out, traveled state after state to 23 states in 1 year, speaking to high school students and college students just like you, telling my story and stories of others. I spoke in all of the international and regional forums, the UN. I testified before the UN Security Council, before the Senate, before Congress, before all the forums that were hosted for Darfur and Sudan. Unfortunately, until today, the situation continues. But I remained hopeful. Because with that hope that I left, I feel we have to do something. But today, as I stand in front of you by telling my story, it is no longer about me anymore. It's about millions of men, women, and children who lived and still suffering in Darfur. I know that your voice will help. And I ask for your help to speak for them. Educate more people, just like Appear, organize this. Tell more people about what's happening. And when these perpetrators perpetrating genocide, it's not just a physical test, the social and cultural test. Today there are over 2 million of children that are out of schools. Education is the key. If we can't reach them, we can help provide education for refugees, internally displaced people. And that is what Darfur Women Action Group is trying to do. I will stop here and will be happy to answer your question. Thank you.
It must be very emotionally draining and traumatic for Nima to have to relive all those memories. But I hear loud and clear that she says she's spoken to Congress and she's encouraging you to write letters and have your voices be heard as well. Let's quickly move along to our next guest, Megan Higginbotham. Megan is the program director for the Darfur Dream Team Sister Schools program at the Enough Project. Students, I want you to take note because Megan is an official staff member now. She gets paid. But she joined the program as an intern and a student activist in 2009 and really made her way up to a professional position. She has traveled to 2 of the Darfur refugee camps in eastern Chad to monitor primary education projects and bring refugee stories back to the U.S. We look forward to hearing her stories. Megan?
It's very bright up here. So thank you for the lovely introduction, and thank you to Avery and Harriton High School for hosting this event. It is the hope of myself, and I'm sure many of the panelists, that many more schools will continue to host these events across the United States. And with that said, I work at an organization called the Enough Project based in Washington, D.C. And we are a research, policy, and advocacy organization working to end genocide and crimes against humanity, primarily in sub-Saharan Africa. The program that I work on, the Darfur Dream Team Sister Schools program, works specifically with youth across the United States. We work with hundreds of U.S. schools to provide them with tools and resources to raise awareness, to learn about the conflict in Sudan, to raise funds for Darfuri refugee education, and to take action to end these conflicts. I am 26 years old. I'm not much older than a lot of you. I know that a decade from now seems very far, but I should warn you, it goes very quickly. And I think that if you had asked me when I was 16 if I thought I would be doing this in 10 years, I'm not sure that I would have known what this was. I'm not sure that I would have known exactly what advocacy was and about the importance of simply raising awareness about these issues. I was a freshman in high school when the Darfur conflict started in 2003, and I didn't learn anything about it. I'm not even sure that beyond taking a world geography class, I could have pointed out Sudan on a map to you as a high schooler. But when I learned about the conflict, when I was in college in 2006, I learned about the conflict and got involved. As a student activist on campus, I started working with STAND. We held rallies and events and chalked the sidewalks with facts about what was going on, and we brought speakers like John Prendergast, who is now my boss, to speak on campus. And I'm pretty sure that if you had asked me then if I thought I would still be working on this today, I would have said, no way. That's 7-8 years from now. No way will this conflict still be going on today. We're loud enough. People are aware enough, aren't they? But unfortunately, here it is, 2014, and the conflict is still going on 11 years after it started. As you heard from some of the speakers today, 2013 was a violent year in Darfur. More than 380,000 people were newly displaced from their homes in 2013, and that's more than in the previous 3 years combined. And 2014 has proven to be no different. The UN Refugee Agency recently announced that more than 200,000 were displaced in the early months of 2014. And that's some of the most rapid displacement that we had seen in Darfur even since the start of the conflict. Just to kind of give you an idea of those big numbers, and they sound really big, but they represent individuals, is that today in Darfur, there are more than 2 million people living in internally displaced camps, and more than 300,000 living as refugees across the border in Chad. And it's not just Darfur where this conflict is going on in Sudan. It's affecting other parts of Sudan as well. There are more than 1.2 million people displaced in South Kordofan and Blue Nile, and many of them do not have access to healthcare, food, water, education, support. And that's where the UN Refugee Agency comes in, and that's where your support for education comes in. And if we could flip to my first slide, that would be great. As I mentioned, 2013 saw some massive displacement in Darfur, and I had the opportunity to travel in October and November, right after I was here at Harriton, to travel to 2 of the Darfuri refugee camps that I had been to before in southern Chad, and meet with some of those newest refugees from this conflict. And when I went to the camps, some of the things hadn't changed. Daily life was still going on. Their refugees who I spoke to were still hopeful that they would be able to return home someday, and that was still their goal. The teachers and the camp leaders were getting ready for school to start. And I met with many of my friends, and they told me, the same stories. We're going about our daily lives here. We're listening to the radio. We're waiting for the day that we can go home. But something that was different about this trip was that I was meeting with new refugees. On my previous trip, I had met with individuals who had been in the camps for 7 or 8 years at that point, and they kind of just went about their daily life and hoped for the future, but the conflict was a little bit more removed. That was different for these new refugees who I met on this trip. This is a photo of a man named Ibrahim Mohammed Yaqub, and he was from an area in Sudan called Dukoon. And Dukoon was actually an area that was not affected by the early years of the violence in Darfur. However, the new bouts of violence that we've been seeing emerging in the last year and a half, it's taken on kind of a different role, and it's affected different areas. And so, whereas his family was safe in the early parts of the conflict, his town was now being attacked in 2013. And so we sat down, and he spoke pretty calmly about, well, militias came in and they laid down new laws, and we kind of basically had to pay taxes for security. But then he started talking about the nightly attacks that started, and kidnappings, and then the daily attacks, daytime violence. And he said that he realized that it was only a matter of time before a member of his family was killed or kidnapped. So in the early morning hours of an April morning last year, he fled with his 2 wives and his 12 children. His mother, who was in her 60s, chose to stay because it was the only home that she had ever known. And he spoke pretty calmly about all of this, and I asked him, Ibrahim, and this was in October, so it had been about 6 months since he had left his home, and I said, what has happened to your town? What about your mother? And this is where he became upset, and he said that he received word from his neighbors that his part of the town had been burned, his house had been burned, a few of his neighbors had been killed, and at that point he had had no word from his mother. He hoped that she was alive, but because he could not confirm, he said that he was worried that she may have been killed. And so I asked Ibrahim, like I always ask the refugees, what can I do? What is the message that you want me to take back to the United States? And he said, remind people that the conflict is not over. Darfur is not over. The violence is still raging. These attacks are still happening. Something must be done. And he said something that really resonated, that he kept repeating. He said, don't forget Darfur, don't forget Darfur. And so I've come back from that trip and talked to lots of schools about his story, and I think he represents just one of the millions who are still affected by this conflict that's gone on for 11 years. And another thing that he mentioned when I said, well, what might be good in this refugee camp? And he said, well, my children are already enrolled in schools. The UNHCR, the UN Refugee Agency, had schools ready for the students when they arrived. And so if you flip to the next slide, this is a photo of myself and of 2 of the refugees who I've known for a few years now. And the woman on the right is, I used to say girl, but she's 19 or 20 now. The woman on the right, Husseina, is a student who I first met her when she was about 16 or 17, but I had communicated with her over the years. And she was a student at one of our primary schools that we supported, and she was one of these rare kind of gems, and she played soccer, which, if you're familiar with Darfuri culture, a lot of the women don't play soccer, but she did, and she would get out there and play soccer with the boys, and despite their best efforts, they'd have to let her play. And so she just had this spirit about her, and we always thought, Husseina has some real potential. And sure enough, as soon as she graduated 8th grade, and enrolled in 9th grade, she became a 6th, 7th, and 8th grade teacher. And so was teaching at the primary school while she was enrolled in secondary school. And she has actually been the lucky recipient of a scholarship in Chad, and she spends 9 months out of the year at a medical school learning how to be a nurse, and the other 3 months she spends back in the camp working in the camp's hospital. And so Husseina, I think, represents kind of just one, again, one of the many refugees who, if just given the opportunity, how much they can shine. And if you flip to the next, I can show some of the photos of from our program, and actually, if you're not aware, Harriton has actually been a donor, and I think the check this year was $8,000 to support refugee education in one of our camps. And so these are some photos of what the schools sometimes look like, or generally look like before they're rebuilt. You can see they're outside, they're just either tarps or thatched roofs. And if you go to the next slide, you can see that actually this was a brand new building that we built 2 years ago, but you can see the roof got damaged in a storm last year, and so they were repairing it right when I was there. You can go to the next slide. And these are just some of the photos of some of the things, like the many, many things that the funds that you can raise go to support. This photo on the bottom left is a photo of one of the classrooms of the newly arrived refugees. And they received uniforms. The photo on the bottom right is of a water pump that we installed at one of the schools, and then just some photos of books and students using a chalkboard that schools in the US here raise money to support. You can go to the next one. And this is a photo of some of the students using a computer that we've taken to the camps so that the students can connect with the students here in the United States on this quasi-Facebook social network that I'm happy to talk to you guys about if you come to my breakout session. But just finally, before I walk away, Avery wanted us to really emphasize how students can get involved in these issues. It can be really heavy to hear survivor stories and to hear about some of the ongoing violence. But there are things that you can do. You can get involved through Gems Not Genocide and support the Darfur Dream Team Sister Schools program. If you go to another school, you can start a club at your school. You can raise awareness, you can raise funds, you can do advocacy activities like lobbying your representatives, taking online actions, doing social media campaigns. So I cannot say enough about raising awareness and just making people know that Darfur is not over. There are other things that you can do locally in your own community. There are refugee resettlement organizations here who are constantly resettling refugees from Sudan and elsewhere, and these refugees generally arrive with nothing. So everything from students volunteering to tutor their kids or teach them financial literacy to running clothing drives or food drives or buying pots and pans so that they have those in their homes or their apartments when they arrive. There's so much that you can do to support survivors of these conflicts here in your own community. And finally, I'll just say something that another panelist was getting at, is that you don't have to fit in one of those boxes to work on these issues. You don't have to be a lawyer, you don't have to be an advocate. There are so many things that you can do, and I've met so many individuals working on these issues, coming at it from different angles. You could be a human rights lawyer, you could be a doctor working with Doctors Without Borders, you could be a politician advocating on these issues, you could be an artist who installs art pieces or takes photographs and documents these atrocities. Some of the most important people in this industry are our techies and our communications associates who know how to take the wonky politics and turn it into something that the general public can understand. There's really something for everyone. No matter what your interest is, what your skill sets are, you can find a way to apply those to raising awareness about human rights issues and taking action. And so I would encourage you to just find what it is that you're passionate about and what you're good at and what you enjoy, and find a way to make that work for this. Thank you.
A lot of good news you can use in the end of Megan's address. I'm gonna just deviate for a second. Mr. I know we're running short on time and we don't want to kind of gyp Jonas Clay of any of his time. Are we still good for breakout sessions, or is there a notion maybe we bring up all of our guests and we do another Q&A where everyone can ask them on the stage, or do we still want to do breakouts at the end? Informal? Okay, so at the end of our final panelist speech, if all of our guests could maybe come up and join me together on the stage, and that way we could just run around the audience with microphones and people can get their questions in. Our guests were so good and we didn't want to cut them off. Next we have Jonas Clays. He is a senior program officer with the United States Institute of Peace. He does extensive research on the prevention of electoral violence and mass atrocities and efforts to counter violent extremism. He's authored several book chapters, peer-reviewed articles, and policy briefs on the prevention of violent conflict. Please welcome Jonas Claes.
Good evening. Megan was right, if you don't like the spotlights, this is not the place to be. Well, I'm going to start by thanking Abby Bernstein, Dan, and Maizumo for organizing this wonderful event. I'm very happy to take the opportunity today to speak a little bit about my work on the prevention of genocide and mass atrocities. So in my intro presentation, I will briefly introduce the work that we do to prevent mass violence, and then I will end by making some suggestions how everybody in this room can make a contribution to this field. Let's start with the first slide. So, in what will come up soon, you can see an image of the United States Institute of Peace, where I work in Washington, D.C. This is a peace-building organization funded by the US Congress. It's a quasi-governmental organization. And we are mandated to prevent and resolve violent conflict. My personal focus is on the prevention. The prevention of electoral violence in particular, as well as mass violence. So from early on in my studies, I was always very much persuaded of the benefits of preventive action. It is preferential in financial terms, for moral reasons, and it's simply more effective. It's the same in the medical world. If you see the weather forecast and the weather's cold outside, you'll wear a scarf before you go outside to prevent yourself from catching a cold. In peace building, it never seems to work that way. We only tend to pay attention after we've seen the gruesome images on TV or online, the ones that were earlier shown by Ron. We tend to suffer from what we call a reactive culture, and the prevention component is very much missing often. Technically, the prevention of these awful crimes that we've seen is easier. Getting communities together to resolve their issues and talk to each other is easier before the neighbors have started to kill each other. Getting them together afterwards is much more difficult. But there are certain challenges that our community is facing in the work on prevention. Recognizing that there is a problem before the violence has erupted is a very, very difficult challenge for politicians, for advocacy organizations, and for everybody who's involved in this work. So making the case for preventive action is an important part of our mandate. Let's move to the next slide, please. So on the next slide, I will briefly introduce 4 types of actors with which we work, moving all the way from big strategic actors to the grassroots. First of all, of course, the United Nations is a big partner of the Institute of Peace, mostly known, of course, by the peacekeeping operations that they do, blue helmets that you're all familiar with. So some of my colleagues offer training to peacekeepers before they are being deployed to some of these areas. I closely work together with what's called the Office for the Prevention of Genocide and the Responsibility to Protect. Responsibility to Protect is a political tool that was unanimously agreed upon in 2005 amongst all heads of state and government that are represented at the UN General Assembly. But slowly this norm is far from realized, as we've seen today by these testimonies. It is slowly moving from an aspiration to reality. Responsibility to Protect has 3 different pillars that is important to note. First of all, there is a responsibility of each country in the world to protect its own people inside. Secondly, there's a responsibility of an international community to assist these countries in upholding their primary responsibility. And thirdly, the international community has a responsibility to act decisively if crimes are manifestly taking place or are imminent. So let's move to the second actor here. I have a lot of respect for this lady. She is currently representing the United States at the United Nations, US Ambassador Samantha Power.
the face of the US commitment to this agenda, I would say. Also author of the Pulitzer Prize winning book, A Problem from Hell. I would certainly recommend you reading that. She is one of the driving forces behind the creation of a new instrument that we have in Washington, D.C., which is called the Atrocities Prevention Board. The board represents senior officials from the various agencies that, if a crisis is on the horizon, that tries to look at all the means that there are available to take action decisively early on. Certainly this is no easy challenge, but without the institutions in place, the chances that action will be taken in a crisis like Darfur is even less certain. Let's go to the third image. This is Paul Kagame, current president of Rwanda. I put his image here just to stress once again that the importance of preventing genocide and mass atrocities starts within the country itself. Action needs to be taken earlier on when the signs are present within the country itself. When the early warning signs are there and a country is either unwilling or unable to protect its own people, then it is the responsibility of the international community to step in. President Kagame, of course, came into power after the Rwandan genocide, but certainly there's a lot of work to be done right now still. There's still some repression taking place, and Kagame has also been accused of killing hundreds of thousands of people in the run-up after the genocide. And let me start with the fourth image, which I want to spend the most time on here. This is an image of local peace builders. These are people that are slightly older than yourselves. Most of these people in this image are part of an inter-party youth forum in Kenya, where we've run a project throughout this fall and the winter to study the 2013 presidential elections in Kenya, which were widely hailed as a success by the international community. Kenya has had a problem with electoral violence in the past, but 2013 was considered different. 2013 was relatively stable and considered a success, at least according to the international community. But what we heard on the ground was quite differently. The analysis that the international community had conducted was very much based on elite-level conversations. So politicians in the capital, heads of civil society organizations, etc., not really taking the voices of people on the ground, called the wananchi in Swahili. So we went out there and did a study in 10 very remote counties throughout Kenya. This was on their way to Marsabit, which is all the way up in the north, where they traveled by jeep for about 24 hours until reaching it through muddy roads, asking the people how they experienced the electoral process. Was it peaceful? Were the elections a success? And very often the answer was no. They did not experience the elections as peaceful. They described it as a tense calm at best, a negative peace. A peace that was not the result of peace building, but through suppression, fear. The elections were peaceful in 2013 because of the heavy presence of police, military force, which intimidated the population, as well as the fear of a repeat of 2007, 2008. I want to conclude my remarks here by stating that, of course, the focus has been heavily on the crisis, the severe atrocities that have been committed and are ongoing still today in Sudan, in South Sudan. But this is not a problem that is limited to the African continent. And I think that the images that Ron showed earlier today definitely demonstrated this. And it is not in the countries that you would first think of that early prevention action can be taken. What we will be doing over the summer and the coming fall is to evaluate preventive efforts in some countries like Bangladesh, Honduras, and other countries around the world where prevention is taking place because the risk of violence is very dominant around the time of elections there, to see what worked, what didn't work, and to see if the effective action can be replicated in other countries. Let me conclude by making a few suggestions on how the people in the room can contribute, how you can all make a difference. I think first of all, it is very important to practice tolerance already at your personal level, to expose yourself to diversity and to learn about different cultures. Some of these activities will be organized throughout the school through model UNs. You can advocate for a cause, like Avery is very successfully doing. But you can also participate, like myself, that's how I started to get engaged, in exchange programs, get a foreign education. I think an international educational experience is both a priceless professional asset and a life lesson, because it will strengthen your independence, your tolerance, your cultural sensitivity, and your communication skills. And that will certainly be a very, very important asset as you enter the professional field. Secondly, of course, to inform yourself, it will be critical. The degrees that are being offered in universities throughout the United States are excellent. Starting with political science, international relations, gradually moving towards perhaps peace building, conflict resolution, security studies. I think those are very useful routes. And finally, I would also encourage you certainly to visit our website, which is www.buildingpeace.org. That's the component of USIP's website that is particularly targeted at middle school students, high school students, both the students and the educators. So I'll definitely encourage you. I have some flyers and some materials, so afterwards I'll bring them up here and I'll be happy to hand them out. I thank you.
Well, I think all of our guests have offered some terrific ideas on how we can feel empowered to make change. And I just want to thank all of our guests for joining us this evening. I want to thank all of you on behalf of Harrington High School and Gems Not Genocide for being here, for opening up your eyes and your ears and taking advantage of this great night. Now, we had planned to do breakout sessions, but in the interest of time, we're going to keep it a little more casual. Our guests, if you'd be kind enough to linger a little bit down here in front of the stage, we'll turn the lights up, and any of our guests who've joined us this evening, feel free to come on down and just, mingle with our guests and dialogue with them, again, on a more intimate level. So thank you so much for coming, and feel free to come on down and join our guests for a little bit. Thank you.